Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're just beginning to open up the lobby and let people in, so welcome. Bear with us for a few minutes whilst, well, a minute hopefully, whilst we let everybody in. Okay, just going to a holding pattern of welcoming people. We're just opening up the lobby, so we'll be kicking off shortly, so thank you. Okay, let's get started. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us from wherever you are around the world. My name is Kerry Hallard, and I'm the Chief Exec of the Global Sourcing Association in the United Kingdom. And I'm also representing here, obviously, the event of the Global Technology and Business Services Council. So for those of you that are not familiar with the council was founded 2 years ago when the industry responded so phenomenally well to the crisis and the issues brought around by the pandemic that we felt it was a perfect opportunity for the global industry to unite and present a really positive voice for the industry and a vision for the future of the industry. So the council is comprised of 12 of the leading industry associations around the world representing the industry of global technology and business services, obviously. So many of those members are with us today, and today our event is set to give an overview of what's happening around the global technology and business services industry and predictions, what we think you should all be thinking about to prepare for 2023 and beyond. So the way we set this webinar up is we're going to do an introductory overview of the macroeconomic size and opportunities for the global industry. And then we're going to introduce members of the council to give a little bit of an overview of what's actually happening in their regions. Again, on maybe a national government level, as well as sort of the trends for the industry. But then we're going to go into a much more detailed discussion about the trends, what we're seeing coming down the line, what we think our members and our community need to be preparing themselves for. We are going to be opening this up to Q&A, and I will be keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A. So please do put any comments you've got in there. So without further ado, I'd be delighted to hand over to Angus, who is the CEO for Genesis Global Business Services Division. Mark, you're joining us from Arlington in the US. It's early.
I am indeed.
Thank you very much for getting up and being here to share the top level view of what's going on in the industry. So over to you, Mark.
Well, thank you very much, Kerry, and hello and welcome everybody. Thank you very much to the Global Technology and Business Services Council for inviting me to be part of this webinar today, and I look forward to presenting some of the key trends. While I'm doing that, I'm just going to share my screen and my presentation. Got a short presentation to run through, which is looking at some of the global trends that are happening within the industry. And let me just go into full screen. And while I do that, Kerry, thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you also to those that are joining us from all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon to you, wherever you are. Can you see full screen there, Kerry?
Not yet, sorry, I muted myself. No, not yet full screen.
Okay, give me a moment. Just go to... There we are.
Yeah, that's all.
Yes. Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you. So yes, so a little bit about myself. I am Mark Angus. I'm the CEO, Research and Strategist of Genesis Global Business Services, a global to local research advisory and thought leadership consultancy that specializes in producing GBS, BPO and IT digital market trends. And I'm not going to spend too much on my profile, but that just gives you an overview. I'm also the founding partner of the World Source Marketplace for Global Business Services, GBS World. So where's the market right now, and what is happening in the global industry, and what do we foresee in terms of the forecast and growth of the industry? Well, the global growth in the outsourcing and shared services market is certainly looking very, very positive. You can see here a breakdown of the ITO, BPO, and shared services market. The growth between from the different years, from 2018 to 2023, is very positive across all those areas. From 2021 to 2023, the growth forecasted in ITO services is between 467 billion, forecasted to grow to almost 520 billion by 2023. In your BPO and O services, growth from 2021 sits at 244 billion, and it's forecasted to grow to 284 billion, or just over 284 billion in 2023. And then in the shared services environment, again, very significant growth that we are tracking here, from 2021, 154 billion, to growth of just over 211 billion in 2023. So this really shows that the industry in general is in a very big growth trajectory. And then we have a slightly different view that we're showing to you, which is basically the estimated total global contact center market growth. Now, this is a different view. It looks at the captive in-house market, shared services, and outsourced environment, so the combined global contact center market growth from 2017 to 2027. Again, you can see year-on-year growth looks very, very significant. It is forecasted to expand by 24% between 2018 to 2023. And you can see that there's certainly significant growth right up until 2027, where the industry is expected to grow to around 496 billion in market value. And when you break this down into the different regions, you can see that the largest share of the global contact center market sits within the North American region at over 136 million, Asia Pacific at just over 109 billion, the UK market 98 billion, and then Central and Latin America just over 22 billion, and then Africa just over 11 billion. And again, it shows the robustness of all these regions. You can see that there's certainly growth across the different sectors. And this is a very interesting and very exciting and dynamic time for the industry at the moment. So what are some of the key trends that we're predicting for 2023 and beyond? Well, I've got 5 key trends to share with you today. And the first one is that global buyers will still emphasize quality and value, but still prioritize cost reduction going into 2023. We have a global network of buyers that has joined the GBS World Marketplace, and we poll them and survey them on a regular basis. 82% of those global business buyers indicated that cost reduction will be their main outsourcing objective going into 2023. So cost reduction is still high on the agenda. 51% of those global buyers believe that innovative and enabling technology will help them reduce costs and improve their customer experience. But then side by side with that, they're also wanting that increase in value and quality. 38% indicated that they're looking for greater performance and higher value services that translate into better customer experience and therefore into better customer lifetime value. And then the number one priority or criteria is still data protection security. That's the highest thing on their list right now. And they're looking for that from both their service providers and their nearshore and offshore locations. The second trend is that of the greater shift to total or human experience. And we've broken this down into its distinct areas. Human experience encompasses various areas. It's not only customer experience, but it also encompasses employee experience and technology experience and various other areas of the experience, the total experience that a customer has with a brand or an organization. So in the customer experience environment, you're going to see it become more personalized, more authentic, and more conscious. And what we mean by conscious is that the movement globally into ESG, so environmental, social, and governance, is impacting the environment, and consumers themselves are becoming more conscious about the brands that they work with and the brands they interact with. And they're wanting them to be more conscious of the environment around them. They're also wanting them to be more authentic in their dealings with them and to be more trustworthy and trustable in the way that they interact with them. And then employee experience will focus on mitigating the talent gap management that is out there and will become just as important as customer experience. We're seeing a lot of movement in the employee experience space right now. Digital experience, we will see their greater use of web chat, email, social messaging, but voice will still remain a strong channel. In the technology experience environment, We will see a lot more innovative technology, a lot more enabling technology. AI will increase enabling technology that will empower the agent at the desktop. In leadership experience, the leadership experience area will focus more on agile leadership to cater for a lot of the growing trends and demands, and addressing the global shortage of critical managerial skills. In social experience, the social media environment is going to gear up for new meta, AR, and VR experiential customer service interactions. In innovation experience, you're going to see a lot more happening in the self-service environment, predictive and in-app interactions. And finally, in user experience, that will become a lot more analytical and be focused on micro interactions as people interact with either a website or an app. The third trend we are predicting is that you're going to see a lot more multi-location tier 2-3 strategies to ensure business continuity. 32% of the global buyers that we polled are outsourcing indicated that they will pursue multi-location strategies in 2023 and spread the risk across various geographies. In fact, you're going to see more efforts, whilst you're going to see efforts to move work back on shore, this will be impeded by inflationary pressures in markets such as the US and the UK. Eastern Europe will remain a preferred nearshore region for Western Europe and will grow, as well as India, the Philippines, and Asia will continue to register significant growth in the next year. Central and Latin America will see incremental growth from nearshore US, and increased attention and focus will also be placed on Africa as the next GPS and BPO frontier. 34% of global businesses are considering more tier 2 and tier 3 locations, and that's not only at a country level, but also at a city level. We've seen that in various markets where organizations are based in tier 1 cities. They're also looking at tier 2 cities and tier 3 cities to look at spreading their risk, but also tapping into new talent in these locations. The fourth trend is that of hybrid working, which will become the new normal in the year ahead. We're hearing a lot about that. And this is just a snapshot of the GBS organizations that we polled in the survey with regards to their multiple hybrid virtual and physical work model plans. You can see that it sits anywhere between 2 days on site and 3 days at home, 3 days on site or 2 days at home, 1 day on site or 4 days at home. But this also depends on the individual needs, risks, and service requirements of clients in different vertical industries. So what we're finding is that a lot of the GBS organizations, and specifically outsourcers, are having to cater for that. Some of their clients are saying, no, we want you to be completely on site. Others are saying they're quite happy to adopt this hybrid model. And that's going to come down to an individual need on a per client basis. The fifth trend is that of the surge of outsourcing from businesses to SME providers. In fact, 87% of small US businesses plan to outsource a business process in 2023. That's quite significant, a big trend. That's small businesses outsourcing to potentially small outsourcers. Small and medium M&As will also take place. You're going to see a lot more happening with small and medium BPOs and ITOs that will become targets for mergers and acquisitions from source market players. 56% of enterprise buyers are looking to more boutique providers, hubs, and small-scale delivery centers. And then you're also going to see a lot more startup growth and SME growth in 2023. More SMEs and BPOs will launch or experience growth in emerging markets, including Africa, Asia, the CALA region, and Eastern Europe. And another trend that we are seeing, and it's already happening from the marketplace component, is we're seeing a lot more BPOs and ITOs in the source markets seeking partnerships with BPOs and ITOs in offshore markets. And they're doing this in order to subcontract work out, subcontract overflow work, or seasonal work to these BPOs and ITOs. So we see that trend continuing into 2023. And as a result, we're also going to see more growth in managed service provider platforms for SMEs to collectively grow and scale, where 5 SME outsourcers, for example, will be able to cater to the needs of one large enterprise client. So that's my predictions for the year ahead, Kerry. And now we can move over to what the regions have to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was a great overview, Mark, and I'm really looking forward to discussing that with the rest of the panel, whether everybody agrees with these trends. I certainly am, in agreement with everything that you've presented there. So yes, Jacek, I know you are in the airport and you're about to jump on a plane, so I'm going to go to you first. So Jacek Levernes, one of the founders of ABSL. ABSL originated as the Association for Business Service Leaders in Poland, but I know you're now across Central and Eastern Europe and also in the DAX region. So lovely to get your perspective on what you're seeing for those regions.
Thank you very much, Kerry, and very nice to meet you all. Sorry for the setting, it just had to do this slide. Now, I of course agree to everything I think what was just presented. Maybe to give a little bit more depth, with Poland and Eastern Europe being nearshore markets, there is three different trends, sort of macro trends that we are seeing. Being more about value than low cost, it is clear that the different shared service centers or GBSs are more becoming operations centers. That means that you see more and more advanced vertical specific services that are being placed there. For banking, for example, that means AML, KYC, risk operations. For pharma, that means CRO types of services, etc., as you go across different industries. That means much more advanced type of jobs that are being placed in those centers. Two, what you're seeing also, of course, is much more automatization, digitization of the back office work, so of the traditional shared service work of F&A, HR, procurement, and that's a trend we will continue seeing. Finally, the third one is that the data, all of these really operations centers, more actually than GBS centers that they're sitting on, is something that's not being only pushed as with insights and opportunities to HQ and to the businesses, but slowly and surely, especially on the mature centers, this is something that's being expected by the business. Now, in terms of short to midterm trends, we continue to see growth, and I think that speaks with the numbers that were just shown. In Eastern Europe and in Poland, we've seen growth over the last years in between 5 and 10% in terms of headcount, but I think that equates to, of course, dollar and euro terms. We believe that now with the potential inflation and a potential recession that's coming, that there may be some short-term freezes, corporate freezes, that will mean that this growth may be more closer to 5% next year. But then again, in the mid to long term, actually, it will mean that the growth will actually speed up, because as we know, we're a defensive industry. So when the corporates that are trying to get out of say improving their P&L and getting out of a tight spot, then of course outsourcing and nearshoring, offshoring is something that's pretty important, and that would mean that this growth, we think, actually may even go to 10-15% in 2024 and 2025. Beyond that, of course, the war is something that is impacting some of the things that are happening. There was a lot of collaboration and a lot of empathy with the war in Ukraine, and actually Poland, Romania, and the different countries took in a lot of different refugees. We're talking about millions of people, probably 4 to 5 million in Poland and several million in Romania, Czech, Hungary, Slovakia, and so on. That has actually, going back to business, that has slowed down, I think, some of the new investments that are coming in. That means that it's maybe fewer companies that are currently considering this compared to, let's say, the last 5 to 7 years. And it's taking a little bit longer to make those decisions. As before, maybe it took 6 months. Now it takes 9, 12 or more months to decide on actually opening up a new shared service or outsourcing center. Nonetheless, we're still talking about 800,000 jobs in Eastern Europe, 400,000 of those jobs in Eastern Europe. And most of the current players and shared service and outsourcing companies are growing pretty steadily, obviously the 5 to 10%. And there has been none declared that have been actually exiting due to the war in terms of actually retracting their business. So thank you. And this was an update from ABSL from Poland and Eastern Europe.
Okay, so one quick question on that. That still sounds like really significant and positive growth. How are you accessing, you know, or ensuring there's enough talent to fulfill on that growth when there's a talent crisis around most of Europe?
Obviously, it is challenging everywhere, and it's also challenging in Poland. So we have seen attrition rate go up the last 3-4 years, 2, 3, 4% compared to the average of the years before, and on one side we're trying to import talent, of course, with some success. From Ukraine, it's a little bit tougher because it's more mothers and children, and the mothers need to take care of the children. So we've had little benefit of that. But from Belarus, we've had quite a few IT people, for example, that have come over. But just being very selfish in an industry view, we think that if there is a recession, actually this will help, because that means local markets will be letting people go, and we're seeing some of that already. And I think we'll see a repeat of the crisis 2009, 2012, where the local companies or the go-to-market organizations were letting people go, while actually our industry at the time, of course, with a smaller base, doubled in 3 years in terms of size, in terms of people. So you know, a crisis. There's nothing like a crisis for a business to take good advantage of.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Jacek. I know you've got a flight imminent to catch there, but hopefully you can stay with us until you board. And yeah, you know, we never need to gloat in our industry. You've got to be careful how you position it. But yes, this industry typically always booms when there's great uncertainty and when there's a recession. So right.
Thank you so much, and sorry for the background noise.
No, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. So we're going to go to, I think probably makes sense to go to a neighbouring region. So I'm going to invite you in, Nataliya. Nataliya, you're representing IBEST, which is, well, you're better to describe IBEST than I am, but I think you're based out of Bulgaria.
Yes, thank you, Kerry, and hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to represent IBEST today. And yes, it's a Bulgarian mainly represented organization, but we're also covering also a big part of the Southeast Europe region, as many of our member companies also have a footprint there as well. So I will be covering the specifics of the region and Bulgaria in particular. Logically, the region is not disconnected from the global trends that Mark presented. However, we have our own specifics. And by the way, we also are pretty close to the ABSL Poland presentation here. Our specifics derive here also from the geopolitical situation and the sourcing maturity of the region, which is increasing year over year. This and last year, the technology and services industry demonstrated solid growth. And there was a quick recovery after the pandemic. This was driven by the demand for high value added services and solutions. And this was also supported by the solid technological development, the skilled talent, and the innovation that we possess in country. However, we already see a slight slowdown at the end of this year. The risk of the recession grows, and the companies become more and more conservative in their investment and spending decisions. Having said that, we expect the investments in next year to focus more in the direction of impact sourcing, so the talent issue that we are talking about, retaining talent and attracting, and also digital transformation in order to provide more value to the services. At the same time, with the potential recession, or it's not so potential anymore, the buyers will be looking for cost reductions, cost effectiveness more than before. This gives actually indications that the outsourcing needs will increase. On the other hand, the suppliers are looking to increase the wages to retain the talent in the high inflation environment. So this might cause a bit of a tension between the buyers and the suppliers. One possible outcome here and direction is to implement different business models. For example, based on a specific output, This will require more flexibility though. Another direction, which is, it has already started, is to increase the value added by the providers. So turn into a high value added destination rather than a cost effective one. This is the direction we anticipate that the region and Bulgaria will turn to. The region will continue to be, we expect, a preferred sourcing destination. There is still a high percentage of skilled people, affordable talent still, and the data security is strong, as well as the sourcing maturity. In addition, given the talent shortage and the potential new business models, we expect the companies to move more into the open talent sourcing, and we will see open talent platforms and solutions gain more and more traction. The risks here are associated with the local and social and political instability in Bulgaria. Excuse me.
It's more human.
Apologies. This is the hybrid work environment. The risks that we see, particularly for Bulgaria, are related to the local social and political instability that we see in the country. There are several new bills that we are trying to push that's also related to attracting talent in country. Those bills are pending to be voted. This might mitigate the talent challenge, but the situation is very unstable at the moment. In addition, on the fiscal side, the government is still taking some inconsistent decisions in terms of tax and social systems, and this also might drive potential investors away in 2023. In terms of the trends, I believe it was number 3 from Mark's presentation of the multi-locations. We already see companies that we already have in Bulgaria looking to expand their footprint in the region, as well as this will help their partners, their current partners, feel more secure because they can provide them with additional solutions and redundancy in case of need. To summarize and wrap it up, all of those uncertainties in 2023, we believe will cause conservative decisions and a slight cool down in the industry development. So recession, it won't cause a huge drop, but there will be a cool down definitely, especially in comparison to the development we saw in the past years. However, on a positive side, it will open up space for more added value solutions, and it will definitely reshape the image of the region that we are representing.
Okay, thank you, Nataliya. Right, really interesting to go to a very different region around the world now. So Frankie, representing IBPAP in the Philippines, if you could just give us a really sort of like 3-minute overview as to, you know, what's happening in the Philippines, that would be brilliant.
Thanks very much, Kerry. Good evening from the Philippines. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for inviting IBPAP. We represent the IT and Business Process Association of the Philippines, and the way that we've organized ourselves in this sector on the side of the world is we actually are composed of different subsegments. So we are very popular for contact center services, shared services, and IT outsourcing services, but we do have specialized segments on the animation, game development, as well as health informatics. And so with that kind of context, we're very optimistic and we're very poised, particularly around digital transformation. Because in this year, actually, we welcomed a new leadership in the Philippines, and we are very heartened that this new administration is also very high on their agenda is digital transformation, and also ensuring that ease of doing business, particularly ensuring that the Philippines remains a preferred IT BPM destination is on top priority of that list, and also supporting that with upskilling and reskilling. You know, with the talent crisis, this is really something that we need to put a lot of focus on. And so together with the members of the of IBPAP, as well as our allied sectors, we have recently launched what we call Roadmap 2028. This is a periodic exercise that we do in the Philippines so that we can take a look at our performance as an industry for the past 6 years, and following the new national priorities and the national agenda, we can carve out our path for the next 6 years. And we've identified several acceleration levers because to the presentation earlier, some of these trends resonate very well as we're looking at the Philippine situation, particularly around growth on higher value services. And we want to make sure that the Philippines is very well positioned for that. So talent development is definitely part of those key acceleration levers. The right kind of policy and regulatory support is really also, it's going to push whether investment decisions, especially with what's happening around the world, are going to put Philippines in terms of the top picks. Infrastructure is also something that we want to really rally our allied sectors on, particularly because we're also seeing the same trend of sort of a hub spoke satellite model, where a lot of the tier 1 cities have got locators and investors that now want to expand. And we're also positioning our different locations, not just, you know, the typical cities, the larger cities that our locators will typically go to. And that involves an entire community, an entire set of ecosystem that we need to set up across the country. And of course, work from home hybrid. This is something that is here to stay. One of the big wins that we've had in the industry is really ensuring that we've got government support in terms of enabling the hybrid work condition. And so to kind of summarize, our vision is really to continue to grow. We're very optimistic, especially with the support of the government, in terms of even doubling our headcount, almost doubling our headcount in the next 6 years. There is that opportunity, but of course, in order to do that, we have to make sure that we are positioned from a talent perspective, infrastructure, as well as policy. And impact creation is also very high on our agenda. We want to make sure that we can rally our industry players within the Philippines to have their own ESG agenda and really make it sector-wide, so that we can move as one and really forge that path that we have set for ourselves in the next 6 years.
Okay, fantastic. Really great to hear about your roadmap, and very brave to be putting it out there for 6 years ahead when we know that the last 2 years have just basically turned the world on its head. So yeah, fabulous. Thank you very much, Frankie. Debi, I'm going to come to you. Another part of the world, and coming at it from a different perspective, has obviously been predominantly a buy-side nation. So Debi Hamill, Chief Exec of IAOP in the United States.
Thank you, Kerry. I think the first thing I want to say is we may be different, but we are all the same in so many ways. And I feel like that whole we're in this together during COVID still applies. We're all facing a lot of the same things. I'll hold off on the trends we're seeing at IAOP until we get to that portion. I have a couple of comments, and then I'd like to share, a little bit of some stats that our good friend Everest Group has given us for today. But I think overall, there's a little bit of pullback. We're all still very concerned with the global economy. The fear of recession is really resonating. And as layoffs are happening in the tech industry, there's really a sense of, okay, what other shoe is going to drop? So I think that is something we're all facing. And certainly Mark's presentation was so spot on. We're seeing all of that same stuff here. We're finding that travel budgets are still tight. So while business is booming, and yes, I think the industry is quite resilient and really growing, there's still a little bit on the enterprise buyer side of, oh, okay, but maybe not yet. So that's what we're seeing here. I don't know if that's a global trend. Kerry, I think you and I have talked about this a couple of times. But coincidentally, Everest Group is presenting today their findings from their key issues study they do every year. So they were kind enough to provide me with some stats I think that are really pretty interesting. So let's start with industry research that's showing the global services industry will remain resilient despite continued challenges, which I think we're all saying. So I have some percentages with respect to budgets. 37% of enterprises expect budget growth in 2023 to be nearly flat. 32% project a slight spending increase, 3 to 5%. 10% expect significant growth of more than 10%, and 20% project moderate to significant declines. So that's, something certainly to keep in mind. This one is very interesting when you're looking at things year over year. Easing cost pressure is the #1 factor that will drive demand in global services. The other main drivers are solve the talent problem in key geographic areas, which of course we're talking about, pragmatically accelerate digital initiatives. Again, we're talking about that, and increase service delivery resilience. I don't think that any of this is a surprise. I think we're all seeing the same thing. This is very well put. And then when we talk about cost and price pressure, it's the #1 business challenge organizations expect to face in the coming year. And that, I believe, is up over last year. Adopting other top concerns, adopting to evolving customer needs and business models, like we talked about that, talent, skills, and shortage, clearly, slow demand and slower decision-making. And then from a talent and skills perspective, concerns are easing slightly from prior years. And this year's study, talent ranked as the #3 concern. In 2022, it was the top challenge that was identified. So, I think we're all basically seeing the same thing, and we're all in agreement. It's really interesting to, to look at these, the study and what's come out of it. So just a little plug for Everest. They're doing the webinar today, and I know it's available for replay. So there you go. It's great stuff. I think they're presenting all of it. So with respect to the trends, I think I'm going to hold off on that till later. Our members are seeing similar trends to what's being discussed and maybe a few others, but I do think we need to point out that with respect to talent, impact sourcing, and the social aspect is going to become more and more critical, and I think provides us more and more opportunity to solve some of those problems. So thank you. I look forward to the discussion, the rest of the trends when we get to that point. Thanks, Kerry.
Okay, yes, thank you very much, Debbie. Yeah, ESG huge on the agenda, and impact sourcing significant, really significant within that. So I'm now going to go over to you, Anthony, over in Malaysia, representing GBS Malaysia, and then last but not least to you, Traci, and I'm bringing you in last because obviously there was that prediction that there's so much work coming into Africa now. So we're going to close off with you. But Anthony, over to you, please.
Thank you, Kerry, and hello to everyone from Malaysia. I definitely echo what Debbie just now shared in terms of talent on top of the list and sustainability, and agree with Mark in terms of the projections, quite similar in terms of what we have been looking at in the market. But just to give a quick background on Malaysia so that everyone is on the same page, it's about 600 over GBS companies operating here specific, and of course, tech workforce is about 1 million. Or so, I would say. And in terms of growth rate, we are looking at about 6.2% compounded annual growth rate for the next 5 years, based on a report that we have just recently published, right? And of course, by segment, ITO, BPO, and captive shared services are continuing to grow due to the proximity, best shoring, language skills, and digital skills. So overall, as a population, Malaysia is about 30 million, and about 13 million of which are workforce related, right? And the highest employment is generated in the GBS sector in terms of the last 2 to 3 years. So you're talking about an industry which is creating a lot of employability and a positive social impact, right? And from the study perspective, just to focus on a little bit on the predictions, any technology supporting hybrid and cloud and tools related to that is going to be high on the agenda for companies and as well as for providers. And talent, I think we have mentioned, in this call so many times, but particularly if I were to focus, I think for talent, it's about the learning culture and also the type of workforce, which is the open talent and the gig workforce is going to be on the rise, right? Another aspect that we're finding is that there is going to be a significant revolution on IT as a service. and GBS, or the digital and BPO segments, are going to apply that actively as well. And the fear of losing trust and personal data protection and cybersecurity is becoming high on the agenda for the BPO, ITO segments as well, right? And shared services, because you're having data and conversations going across the world. So we sense that there will be a heightened awareness and demand for that segment going through. And finally, sustainability. And this covers all of the angles, the ES and G and D&I as well, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusivity in terms of everything that you do. And tech industry is embracing this a little bit aggressively and ensuring that we are leading the market in that as well. So just to wrap, in terms of, I would call it 2023 and 2024 as a transitory phase. I think it's a shift post-pandemic we're going to go through, and then probably 2025 onwards, we're going to come back to a new high growth phase. For the BPO ITO segment, up and down means a different set of opportunities. When economies are changing and shifting, globally, I think there is some significant projection on recession, and which also means companies are going to make certain decisions. And by now they would have already made what they're going to do, right? And finally, in terms of what will differentiate us would be talent, the public-private participation, the digital infrastructure, the support given by government and the industry. I will put this as the 4 pillars of how we can work together as an industry and also create the positive social impact. Thank you.
That's great, Anthony. Thank you very much for sharing that. And absolutely, there is a very important role for technology in driving sustainability all around the world. So I'm sure we'll come on to that subject shortly. So Traci, sorry for keeping you waiting. But yes, Traci Freeman representing BPESA, joining us from South Africa.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Kerry. So you mentioned sort of the Africa plan. Where's that coming in? And Mark referenced during his kickoff to the session that there's definitely a focus on Africa, and there most certainly is. So I think just if I touch on Africa first and then sort of do a bit of a deep dive into South Africa, the opportunity from an African perspective is the large burgeoning youth contingent, which offers a great servicing community, obviously across the sort of the English, the French, the Arabic aspects from a language perspective, and definitely smatterings of European languages across the African continent. Not only is the African continent representing a servicing community that comes with a young and enthusiastic youth servicing talent pool, but also a consumer pool that a lot of brands have become aware of. And with the economic decline that's coming down the pipe and everyone's sort of watching to see what's going to happen, here's an added market for a lot of global brands to consider tapping into. So we definitely are seeing that coming through. If I go from a South African perspective specifically, and the work that BPESA, the industry body, does, there's a couple of key areas here. So we've heard COVID represented on the call. South Africa really did very, very well during the COVID period, and that was mostly due to the collaborative nature that the South African industry has. So the private sector, the operators that are already on the ground, the supply chain that supports them, government, and the industry body. So working collectively together really allowed for South Africa to show that resilience when COVID hit. And in a very fast fashion, we had organizations working from home, and it's become a phenomenal success story that really put South Africa on the map. And since then, we have seen fantastic growth. We've seen a lot of source markets like the US, the UK, looking at alternate geographies from a resilience perspective. And we are seeing a 22% year-on-year growth for the global business services sector within South Africa. We are very focused in on, and always have been, and this touches in with the global need for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Impact sourcing was actually born out of and launched out of South Africa in 2016. So there's been some fantastic case studies born out of South Africa that have become globally adopted methodologies, frameworks, processes that a lot of our global BPOs have actually implemented, both within South Africa and beyond. So that need to really create that global village, and our board members across the US and the UK that are saying, how do we achieve these ESG and DEIB targets that we have? Both Africa and South Africa are really helping to support that. And it's something that is well understood and well entrenched within the South African market, really, to help support that. I think if I just touch on a couple of other key points, though, about where is South Africa going from a 2022 perspective. So the value proposition for South Africa has always been a high quality, affordable, English-speaking CX destination. And with Peter Ryan on the call now, running the Ryan Strategic Advisory survey annually, South Africa is very proud to be the preferred offshore CX destination for the last 2 years. We shared that with India in 2022. But it's something that we really are seeing a lot of global BPOs looking for alternate destinations, looking at South Africa as an option. And with South Africa having the maturity of regions, having 3 key mature regions, the Western Cape, Cape Town, KZN, Durban, an area called Gauteng, which is where Joburg and Pretoria is, as mature delivery centers, and then a lot of emerging tier 2 centers. And Frankie was speaking to that, kind of really expanding out within the Philippines, and South Africa's seeing that same opportunity as how do we support local and global BPOs and brands to really grow within the region, to make sure that there is redundancy, there is business continuity from both a global perspective, but then once they're in the country from a local perspective. And if I just quickly sort of summarize a couple of other key points, besides the affordability, that stability that we're seeing, that public-private partnership, the attractive incentives that government has put forward to the global brands coming in, supporting the growth of impact sourcing and inclusive hiring, where we're also seeing that value coming in, not only in the voice and the CX component, but a real intentional opportunity to reskill, upskill, and future skill the talent pool in South Africa to support the professional and shared services side of things, as well as that digital and ITO requirement that the globe has seen. So I will say that in my years of having worked with the industry in South Africa, I have never seen so much interest from an end user client perspective, asking BPOs to please look for alternate geographies, but then BPOs themselves who may not already have a footprint in South Africa actually setting up here and looking at either those M&A models or looking at hotel models or build, operate, transfer models. And we've seen a nuance of all of these, which has been really, really exciting. So it's really actually a positive story that we're seeing from a South African perspective going into 2023. And I think let me pause it there. Thank you, Kerry.
Okay, thank you very much, Tracy. I guess I should just give a very, very brief overview of what's happening in the UK before I go to you, Peter, and ask you to give your view on everything you've heard today and what you're seeing going on in the industry globally. So yes, today, obviously this year has been a very tumultuous year for the UK. We've seen 3 prime ministers. Today we embarked upon our new winter of discontent with a whole host of strikes starting out. So we've got strikes across the entire public sector, hitting ambulance drivers, nurses, post workers, baggage handlers, and today train strikes. So yeah, everybody looking for more pay as we enter this huge cost of living crisis, because inflation this year is over 11% in the UK, which obviously is very, very difficult. So the Bank of England has increased its base rate. It's gone up from 0.1% in March 2020, which is incredibly, incredibly low, the lowest it ever had been. It's now at 3%, which, although not that high, is obviously a significant increase over a short period of time and really impacts people's mortgage payments and things like that. But at the same time, we've still got really the lowest unemployment. So unemployment in the UK at the moment is at 3.7%. So I think the main issue we're facing is something that we've been facing since the financial crisis, and that's the UK's productivity puzzle. So our annual growth in GDP is at 0.3%. We as a country are really trailing the other G7 countries on average by 13%. So significant issues in productivity, and nobody really knows why that is. Is it because of the government's austerity policy? Is it because of Brexit? Who knows? However, I firmly believe that part of the solution is really here in this industry. I think companies need to become a lot smarter. And I certainly think that due to the non-availability of ready talent, there will be more outsourcing, there will be more offshoring, and there must be more use of digital transformation to make companies smarter, to help address the UK's productivity puzzle. So that's kind of a top-level overview of what we see happening here. And the other probably big thing happening in the UK is the government is actually going to be issuing its new public procurement reform bill. That's actually going to be going into legislation next year. And a lot of that is focused on making it so much easier to sell services and deliver services into the public sector. And also a lot of that is really focused on having a lot more social value in those procurements. So there's more social value given back to communities. And I see that as being a trend that will actually flow very strongly into the private sector as well as the public sector, as ESG is really firmly on all board agendas. So brief overview from what's actually happening here in the UK. So Peter, you've been waiting so patiently, listening to all of this. Thank you for that. And thank you very much for joining us from Montreal. It'd be really great to get your top level view or response to what you've heard. And I am seeing the questions going into the Q&A, and I do promise we will get to the questions going in.
Kerry, thank you very much for the opportunity to chat today, and a big thanks to Mark for his presentation. You're not going to get a better analyst in this space than Mark Angus, in my opinion. In my view, what the other panelists have presented has been absolutely fascinating, getting that world view and about how things differ region to region. But as I think Debi mentioned, there's certainly a confluence in terms of what some of the broader trends are. I'll just give you a few thoughts from me, because I know that there's a lot of questions that we want to get to, but some of the top line elements that I've been picking up on, and certainly ones I'll be looking for going into 2023, right off the top, obviously the economy is going to be a very important factor. And I'll take a different view than what was presented by Jacek earlier. I actually have some concerns for our space if there is a recession. And I will go back to being a market analyst when I worked in 2008, 2009, when we can all recall the catastrophic tanking of the economy, when we would wake up every morning and see how much the stock market had plunged the previous day. Consumer confidence went southward. Business confidence certainly went the same direction. What ended up happening was that lack of demand in the economy fueled a lack of demand for consumer spend. With the lack of demand for consumer spend, there was an overall slowdown. And by my experience, the outsourcing community, many executives that had banked on the fact that they were going to be able to cash in with businesses looking to offload different elements, especially in the frontline service, found that this just wasn't happening because there was no demand in the economy to offload over to third parties. Now, I think we need to be very careful about correlating a sinking economy with the fact that the outsourcing community is going to be able to recoup significant amounts of revenue. This is something, not necessarily say it won't happen, but we can't necessarily guarantee it will happen. Equally speaking, I think that a comment that was made earlier around Central and Eastern Europe is very important too. We're picking up not just a great deal of interest from Western Europe in regards to moving work over to new destinations in locations in the CEE region. But interestingly, the last year or so, we've been seeing a lot of interest from North America as well. What's important, I think, to differentiate here, especially in the context of North American enterprises that are looking for outsourcers in that part of the world, is that whereas I think Western Europeans are much more aware that it's very much a jigsaw puzzle, it's a patchwork of different countries, North Americans need to realize, much like they were looking at Central America about 10, 15 years ago, every country is going to be different. And we just recently, Kerry, published a report called the 2022 Offshore BPO Confidence Index, where we looked at how outsourcers on the ground in different countries felt that they were able to perform based on a whole series of macro and micro level factors. Certainly within Central and Eastern Europe, we found that the Czech Republic and Poland performed exceptionally well. Both of them were more or less tied for third place out of 17 different countries. Unfortunately, there were other countries such as Bulgaria and Serbia that didn't do nearly as well. And if anybody's interested, they can go to my website and download the report. It's free of charge, and so they can get more information on this. But I think as we move into the coming year, the interest that we're going to see from North America as it relates to Central and Eastern Europe is going to be significant. And we're going to be observing very quickly where North American companies choose to land. That's going to be something that I've very much got on my radar. From a technology standpoint, obviously, the inflection point in regards to where technology is able to not just service the consumer, but also service the agent that's using the technology is important. And we're seeing a lot more about what a user interface or user experience is like for somebody on the front lines, whether they're servicing via voice or via digital. Making sure that the right technology investments are in place is going to be crucial. And I think forward-looking companies on the outsourcing side and on the enterprise side are taking this into account. One point I would just make that Mark related earlier that I think is bang on, this anticipation of the death of voice has badly been overestimated. Voice is very much an important factor in terms of how outsourcing work and business service work is going to be done. And I would just point to everybody, for those of us on the side of the pond like myself and Debbie and Mark, the pushback against Frontier Airlines recently for canceling their voice-based contact center has been huge. I don't think there's very many people that have confidence that this decision is going to work or it's going to last. We had our conference recently, CX Outsourcers, Traci and Mark and myself. We had a great futurist who was speaking, and her prediction, Stephanie Todd, that is, her prediction was that voice is actually going to get bigger. And I think that there's a very good, ample reason to support this. So those are just some thoughts from me. Again, really great presentations, really great discussion so far, and happy to answer any questions that might come through.
Okay, that is great. So that's really interesting. So we've opened up a little bit of a debate, and I'd like to invite Mark back in, and maybe yourself, Pavel, also representing ABSL, on this whole, you know, what's going to happen to the industry in face of recession. So we did a recent resilience trilogy looking at how our industry can help drive resilience for businesses, and one of them was really looking at outsourcing and use of outsourcing being a great tool to reduce capex and focus more on opex, and that it builds in flexibility and agility and scalability and all of those sort of things, and therefore being, a key route for companies as they enter difficult and uncertain times. Mark, what's your view on that? And then Pavel, over to you. And if anybody wants to join the conversation from the panelists, please do put your digital hands up. Yeah.
So Kerry, just to get context, that is outsourcing in terms of addressing the inflationary pressures that are happening right now globally.
Yeah, outsourcing in terms of recession, whether the outsourcing industry is likely to grow.
Okay, I predict that there will be still probably there will be growth across the industry because of the fact that with inflationary pressures and the threat of a recession in these source markets, you're going to see a lot more organizations that are going to be cost sensitive, and they're going to be looking at how they can reduce those costs. That was certainly one of the number one predictions that we put forward in the slide deck and from the buyers that we polled. So I predict that there will be growth because of that, because of the need to reduce those costs and for them to look elsewhere. And you just can't get anything better than 60 to 70% cost savings when you look at some of the OPEX savings that they would realize by outsourcing to some of the offshore markets.
I agree with that. Jacek mentioned that the predicted growth will be on the range of 5 to 10%, and that is less than we had in the past 2 or 3 years, where it was 11 to 15%. So yes, there will be a slowdown in the growth. Definitely, Peter, not fueled by outsourcing, but by the captive companies that are looking, as Mark mentioned, for financial solutions to influence the financial outcome of the companies. That is something that starts the movement. And then, as it was mentioned at the beginning, usually it lasts for, the slowdown lasts for about 12 to 18 months, and then there is a growth. And I would say that would be closer to 15 than 10%. And of course, every crisis is different, but we are talking about the predictive analytics based on the data that ABSL has from the year 2008. So we could see the crisis is slowing it down, but not stopping. And then the outburst of solutions fueled by technology, voice or no voice in general, by technology and by the new ways of working, Kerry, coming back to your trilogy that we have discussed, utilizing the achievements in the times of crisis.
Okay, thank you. Did anybody else want to jump in on that one? There was a question here from Tim Montgomery, which is between GICs and traditional outsourcing, which do you feel will see higher growth, whether from an increase in talent sourcing or a shift in talent models to increase value and or further reduce costs? Did anybody want to add to that? Do you think we've covered that?
So Kerry, I'll hop in there quickly with some thoughts, and I think it's sort of a good question. So I think we're trying to give sort of a one road approach here, and I think it's a multiple approach to this. Definitely there is going to be a shift globally with the economy looking like it's going to be declining. And to Pavel's point, and Peter said earlier, who knows what this actually looks like? How intense is this going to be? Are we going to wake up one morning and, oh dear, or is this going to be a slow approach? The bottom line is we still have global customers. And the thing is, that the first time ever, we've got multi-generational customers that are out there. And that is why voice is never going to go away. That sort of one-on-one engagement is still required, but it's costly. And that is why your brands are going to look for commercially viable solutions to continue supporting their client community. But at the same time, these kind of changes really spur on innovation. And that's where we're going to see some really funky things coming out. Some are already there in the sort of the AI space, in that digital transformation space that we're doing. And again, also spurred on by your multi-generational users. So if you look at your up and coming generations, they don't want to do the voice side of things. So you're going to see a shift in some of the models that are happening. But there is not going to be a one size fits all. And I think you always the one that sort of points at that in the time of change and crisis, the global business services sector seems to come up with the solutions and thrive. So I think it's going to be a multiple shift approach. Just kind of where's the spend going? Some of it's going to be nationalized and reshored and onshored, and some of it is going to be outsourced and offshored, and some of it is going to be replaced and supported by sort of some AI technical solution. So multifold would be my response there.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Traci. And I think that actually goes straight into Dominic Panel's question. I don't know if everyone else is looking in the chat, but Dominic says he's been promoting BPO and ITO for quite a few years and is personally concerned that it's becoming increasingly difficult to reach companies via voice or chat. I'm assuming you mean for you as a consumer to reach those companies. Do we think that this will change? Well, we did an event again with Everest actually short period ago, and that was actually the GSA symposium in London. So it was a GSA event, and an Everest speaker talked about the future of CX, and a big prediction for the future of CX was conversational AI. So that was actually looking at much more sophisticated technologies being used in place of, well, to supplement voice. Nobody wants to get rid of voice. I completely agree. We all want to speak when we've got complex issues to a real person that can address those issues. But the prediction there from Everest was that conversational AI was going to be the biggest new tech to be looking out for. Interested in anybody else's opinion to answer Dominic's question there.
Kerry, can I give a couple of thoughts on that, please? First of all, it's great to hear from my longtime pal, Dominic Panel. That's point number one. Point number two is, unfortunately, I'm seeing more and more of this, and I just referred to the Frontier Airlines decision that came out a couple of weeks ago. I'm finding more and more as a consumer companies that are trying desperately to push people away from any type of a voice interaction. It's becoming much more commonplace now to go onto a website, look for a telephone number, and just simply can't find one. I had a very bad experience a couple of nights ago with a leading food ordering agency here in Canada, where I received an order that was turned upside down and was cold, and was only given one option, and that was to use web chat with them. The entire interaction took over an hour before I got any type of resolution. Now, I'm just speaking for me as a consumer, but it's concerning that there's a lot of organizations that are out there, I'm not saying all of them, that seem to be much more focused on eliminating the voice cost of CX and pushing much more on what they see as technology that is ready for the mainstream, but just might not ready to be, at least at what they're investing in.
Okay, yeah, I completely think it's going to be foolhardy to be following that route, especially when, you know, Mark's slides were all about HX. You know, CX is so important that if you're not really focused on the customer and how the customer wants to be serviced, and you lose that customer, then, you know, you're losing reputation, you're losing business. So it's a big risk. Right, so that's a question. There's a question in here from Tarek. Tarek is looking at future skilling. How do we plan to tackle that initiative? I will be very happy to go to some of the regions, but just to answer that, there is a talent workforce as part of the Global Technology and Business Services Council. So for the very first time ever, we are beginning to look at the competences and capabilities and commonality of language set for the people working in this industry globally. And we're going to be working on one global framework for a lot of those skills, so that buyers, if they're buying from the US and having services delivered from multiple different locations, have some commonality and reassurance that the skills that they're getting from Malaysia are the same level of skills and competences and capabilities they'd be getting from South Africa. So that's one initiative that we're beginning to embark upon, that we're really excited about and really think is due for this global industry. But I don't know whether BPAP or GBS Malaysia or BPESA would like to talk just very briefly, two minutes, 2 sentences to the programs they're individually running.
If I can share, Kerry?
Go ahead, ladies first.
All right. Yeah, just very briefly, in the Philippines, we're very popularly known for frontline services, particularly on the contact center front. And one of the things that we've got our eyes set on is really these emerging trends. We've got some very mature services across the different segments, but we want to move our workforce up that value chain. So it's very interesting to see, because there are actually some global, even regional benchmarks that we can look to in terms of upskilling. And that's one of the focus areas that we have for IBPAP. So as an example, we're getting support from the government to push a national talent upskilling program. And the way that we've designed it, because the industry is very diverse and dynamic, is really taking a look at some huge chunks of categories in terms of the future skills. And what are those? We've got different domain skills that are defined by the subsectors and the segments that we service from the Philippines. We're also looking at some digital skills that are cross-sectoral in nature. And this sits in very nicely with the competency standards that we're reflecting on for the GT&BSC. And there's also some leadership skills that we want to take a look at, because we've got a really good frontline workforce. We also want to ensure that the leadership, both current and future, are ready to navigate through the journey of the workforce that we are upskilling. And of course, there are certain essential skills that we want to also pay a lot of attention to. And that involves a lot of reforms around education that we're starting to work on. Typically, employers are going to work very closely with your near, say, tertiary education graduates very close to employment, but we believe that we need to start planting the seeds around basic education. So really a multi-layer approach that we're looking at in terms of upskilling, not just looking at existing workforce, but really starting as early as the education life cycle. And so kind of put that all together in terms of the different learning tracks. We've also devised some delivery channels. And this was pre-pandemic, was very difficult to make a lot of institutions understand these different delivery channels in which we can offer training. But these different modalities, we offer them up and invite both public and private sector to invest in these kinds of training programs. And our target is really the pool of our existing workforce. We really want to move them up that value chain, but we also want to tap into a talent pool of career shifters, maybe not part of our industry, but are contemplating a career shift. And at the same time, the students, those that are, as early as in basic education, start to introduce the industry to them and really take a look at what are the emerging skills, what are the emerging trends that we're seeing, so that by the time they're ready for employment, it's not so alien to them. And at the same time, of course, a lot of career advocacy for those that are about to enter the workforce and constantly looking for alternative pools of talent. So really, those are the three elements that we have in terms of pushing for this national talent upskilling agenda. We've got to make sure that we've got different learning tracks to focus on, these different channels, as well as talent
Thanks,
pools.
Frankie. So Anthony, anything different that you're doing?
Yeah, just a quick one. What we did was we jointly worked with the Industry Academia Council, which included the government for the human resource development side, as well as the education divisions. And we felt that we need to make sure that these parties are including a nationwide support for all our activities. So what we did was we brought the industry together and developed what's called a Digital Global Business Services Industry Skills Framework. And we designed 9 domains based on what the industry shared, which covers from moderation to BPO services, to ITO services, to HR services, all the way, the full range of all the 9 domains. And from an entry level based on the career levels of platforms they are, and all the way up to the leadership level, right? So the framework is now intensely researched and developed, and it's a 50-page document which we published jointly with the government, which is now becoming a framework for the industry, for the academia, and as well as for professional development, where in-house organizations are also taking it up to develop and use that, particularly designed for the business services and BPO segment, and as well as the digital technology segment. So you got both married together, but making sure that they are supporting the career levels of organizations. So something, we are part of the Talent Council as well. Kerry, I think it's a great initiative that GT&BSC is doing, which will help the industry overall. Thank you.
No, that's great. And it's going to be great working with everybody to move to this common frameworks. So that's one of the trends that we're beginning to see in the UK, is a move towards standardization. So we launched GSA standard terms as a contract. We're just in the throes of doing a standard ESG questionnaire that we want the whole industry to use. There's so much reinvention of wheels that goes on in companies and countries all around the world. So I was just wondering whether standardization is something that you guys are seeing, and also what additional trends you'd like to share and for us to sort of put on the table today. So who wants to jump in first? Can I go to you, Debbie?
Yep. Thank you, Kerry. I wanted to make a comment, and maybe this is just for all of us that have been in this space a really long time. Years ago, it was all about language, and your competitive advantage as a destination was English, or some synergy with Colombia and Spain. And so I have a question. If somebody could just say, is that part now of the upskilling? Is that just flow right into that, or is that still a separate kind of focus area? It's just if anybody could just throw an answer out for that one.
I guess from the Philippines, if I can share, primarily our we provide services primarily for North America. So while the education system is actually very focused on teaching in English, and so this language is introduced very early on, we find that conversational English, we still need to shift to a little bit more business English. And there is spoken, and there is written, and now there's different, omni-channel, and how do we introduce the language aspect to that? So while we've got the foundations down, we also want to make sure that we can target very specific, client responsive type of English, if there is even such a term. But to your point, language, particularly English for North American clients, is still very much a focus.
If I just quickly add on to that, Debbie, sorry, Kerry, definitely are seeing that. So, I mean, South Africa's always pitched itself as predominantly English-speaking CX. So there's a couple of aspects that come in there. There's certainly not a shortage of supply. It seems the South African accent has been well received by the broader source market community. Debbie, for the US, I've even had it called exotic, which was quite interesting. But what we're seeing is that comes with empathy. And that's the conversational English that we're looking at there. But then, of course, with chat coming in such a big way, we've actually just done a bit of a roadshow, and some of the BPOs were saying what is phenomenal about the growth in digital and chat is they no longer have to source for that quality English from a spoken perspective, where the individual, that may be their second language, but they write and type fine in business language. So it just expands that available pool of individuals to service the source market. So I think it's still a play, is my answer.
I'm going to throw out some thoughts here too, Debbie. We run a survey at my company each year of about 700 enterprise decision makers when it comes to CX, and Trace referenced it a little bit earlier in terms of the country rankings. One of the questions we also ask is the extent to which buyers are looking for locations, and what are the attributes that they're looking for in a location. And language skills is always extremely high. Quality language skills is always a big differentiator. What I would say, though, and I think Trace just alluded to this a second ago, is that now we're seeing very much a question about not just voice skills, but also written skills. So when it comes to the fact that we're moving towards more digital interactions, the ability to have very strong written English or written French or written Spanish for whatever the key demand market's going to be, that's very much becoming a point of being essential, as well as just more the academic levels of what you might have succeeded. You've got to be able to have that nuance both in a written format and a voice format.
Yeah, that's great, because when we think about the trends with talent, I always wonder, what we're actually looking at as compared to what we looked at 10 years ago. So thank you. Can I just throw out a couple then, Kerry, trends that our members are really, seeing? Very digital technologies, absolutely. AI. I think there's going to be, and I think this will be global, a real focus on ethical AI and how all of this impacts the human being. So I think we're going to see a lot more about that. A future of work we're still talking about, but I think we're pretty much set with a hybrid workplace. I don't know if we're going to see anything really changing in the near future. So, that pops up as a trend, but I don't even know anymore if that's a trend. I think that's just the way of doing business now. We're focused very much on collaborative supplier governance, and we're starting to expand that more within, kind of the design thinking realm, because thinking like that together really makes it much, much easier when you're working with a partner. And also internally, so internally and externally. So we're seeing a lot of that. We're going to do a lot more to focus on that. Global workforce, of course, I could not talk more about the importance of the E&I and impact sourcing, refugee initiatives. I think that is something so critical. I don't think it's a trend. I think it needs to be absolutely institutionalized. We should be thinking about it all the time. There are so many answers that can come out of this. I had asked Sandy Frinton, the editor of our magazine, to throw out a couple of others in conversations she's had, and number one she had on here was the metaverse, and where that's going to take us. So I think all of these things come down to, when we think about the metaverse and digital and artificial intelligence, cybersecurity still pops up, and I think we've talked about that a little bit before, as number one. this is a real issue, and I think that will be eternally addressed. I'm not sure if we can get to some kind of solution. There are so many what they call bad actors out there, and it's constantly evolving. So I think those are the things we're going to be seeing so much more going forward. And I think we're all kind of on the same page with this. I think this may be global and not necessarily, North America based, but just throwing a few of those out, and happy to hear, what everybody else is seeing.
Can I jump in there, Debbie, and just to respond to your point on impact sourcing, and I just want to also, Kerry, if I can answer Dominique's question about that in the Q&A. So impact sourcing, definitely you spot on there, Debbie. We're also seeing that from our network, where there's an increased focus on impact sourcing, and we're seeing it in the link to DEI or ESG. So the link for impact sourcing to be an important component of organizations and their DEI strategies. That's certainly something that is top of mind for a lot of executives in the source markets. But I also want to just highlight, Dominique's asking, what are countries doing to introduce and support it? There's a lot of initiatives that are happening in various locations. Debbie, you yourself, IAOP, head up the impact sourcing initiative for the North American region. In Africa, BPESA heads it up for the Africa Impact Sourcing chapter. And then we have John, our friend in the UK, who heads up the Impact Sourcing chapter for the UK market. So there definitely is a lot of focus on impact sourcing as a best practice. But Peter mentioned the event that we held in CX Outsources in Las Vegas earlier this year. And we had a panel of people up on the stage, and we asked them, what is impact sourcing? And none of them actually knew what it was. It was quite interesting to see that. So there's a definite need also for education around impact sourcing, its benefits, and what it can offer. There's over 500,000 impact sourcing workers globally, and so there's a lot of room for still education that is needed to get people to aware of the benefits of it.
Yeah, and we really are working on that, and Kerry and I are working closely on that together to get the word out. There's so many benefits. We do the Global Impact Sourcing Award annually, which was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. And even if you read some of the stories of those companies that have received the award, both on the buyer side and the provider or advisor side, it's amazing what can be accomplished. And so I do believe education is key. I am still surprised people don't know what it is. I don't talk about it constantly. I feel like everybody should know by now. But I think we're all determined to make sure that happens,
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about ESG. I think we've all talked about it and mentioned it. So ESG, I think one of the biggest agendas in the boardroom today. We've taken a look at it for the industry, and we've consulted the industry on this, and we're working towards creating a standard questionnaire that enterprise buyers can ask of their service providers. Because at the moment, every enterprise buyer is trying to write that questionnaire themselves, and every service provider is saying, oh my goodness, I've been given a questionnaire by every single one of my clients virtually during the course of the last couple of months, but every questionnaire is different. So we've taken a look at it, but we're looking at it for our industry, which is a people-led industry, it's people-rich industry. So we are looking at E for environmental, but that's more about green data centers and single-use plastics in canteens and things like that, rather than hazardous waste and those bits that impact other industries. We've always been very good at governance. The whole outsourcing and GBS industry has been very strong at governance, but the social piece is incredibly important. And there we are definitely saying you should be looking at the DEI in your workplace. You should be looking at gender pay gap information. You should be looking at impact sourcing and really scratching under the surface as to whether there is any social washing going on, like greenwashing. We don't want any social washing. We want real, real tangible examples that, you know, organizations in their own delivery, but also in their supply chains are ensuring that they're delivering, you know, social value. And I think that moves on to something that hopefully will answer Claiborne Appy's question, and bring in some other bits, and that's about diversity and supplier diversity. So in the S of ESG, we're really proposing that organizations need to look and measure the diversity in their own supply chains. Now, the US has done this incredibly well for a long time. They really lead the way because they've got different regulatory frameworks in place and different compliance, and it's easier because of the way you legislated to actually record it. Here in the UK, we're just starting upon this journey on supplier diversity. I was wondering whether, that's something you, Peter, or you, Mark, see as becoming increasingly important in any of the research that you've done. And where I say it fits back into Claiborne is really looking at, you know, diversities in the consumer base, in the work, in the employment base, as well as in the supply chain.
It's very much a factor, Kerry, and you know, I'll refer back to my buyer survey that we do annually. The one that we did in 2022 indicated that having proper diversity in ESG programs in place was a major decision-making element for an organization looking to engage with an outsourcer. You know, I can remember when I started in this industry nearly 20 years ago, and I would walk into a boardroom of an outsourcing organization, and I'd be sitting around a table with a whole bunch of people that looked like me. And now I go in, and there's a lot more diversity. There's a lot more people from different backgrounds. And I think that the progress is being made. But one thing that's becoming very clear is the client side is demanding that this takes place within the outsourcing community. The client side is expecting that it's going to take place. And I think that you're right when you say that BPOs are getting some of these RFPs and the questionnaires, and they don't know where to start. But the point is, the starting has to happen. It should have started happening ages ago, but it's really got to start happening now. And they've got to put the foot on the accelerator, because otherwise they're just going to lose out commercially, and quite frankly they're going to lose out from a social standpoint too.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so we're getting close to end of time. Are there sort of like key trends that we haven't even touched upon yet that we should really bring to the table? So one for me is the advent of agile sourcing. I think we're going to see a different approach to the way that organizations actually manage their sourcing programs. And I think it goes back to Mark, one of your key trends is collaboration with a very different sourcing ecosystem. So smaller players coming on into the sourcing ecosystem, and obviously to be able to engage with smaller players, you need to be much more agile in the way that you run your RFPs. You know, big enterprise buyers have, in my opinion, in the past often been quite abusive in the way that they actually engage with smaller companies, you know, forcing them to sign up to their contracts, forcing them to, you know, have really unrealistic, you know, liabilities and like that. So we do need to drive a change there for sure.
Very much so. And we're seeing that I see that as being a major global trend in going into 2023. A lot more focus on boutique suppliers, a lot more focus on those SME providers that can deliver real value. Specialization is important, verticalization as well. So, you know, having specific vertical industry focus areas is going to become more important in that regard. And so you are seeing that, yes. And but the good news is that, just as you mentioned, Kerry, there is also on the flip side a lot of organizations that are managing that relationship quite nicely between those large enterprises and the smaller providers with those managed service provider platforms that make it, you know, a fair game for them to be able to deliver those services and to deliver them quite adequately as well.
Okay, thank you. Right, any final comments? Any trends that, you know, we really should have been imparting? We haven't talked much about cloud or any of the new technologies, but I think we all recognise that, you know, the ongoing move to cloud and digital transformation is going to be hugely significant. Final comment from you,
Kerry, sorry, hands. I was just going to say hands up. Sorry, my camera disappeared as Traci. Yeah, just to reinforce, Debbie mentioned the security aspect. So again, I'm not really qualified to really unpack that in detail, but there's definitely going to be a push from a security perspective, and that speaks across the board from your current clients, your standard customers, but also your vulnerable customers. And we know that each geography has their own legislation, their own compliance, and if you're supporting an offshore destination, you have to adopt that compliance. So I see more of that coming in, but equally so I wanted to just add on to what we have sort of touched on, that purpose-driven business from a supply perspective, but also from a customer perspective. So how are we supporting your more vulnerable consumers and customers? And that's where you're going to see those purpose-driven entities looking for the support supplier organizations that can well appreciate the more vulnerable customer and give that HX, that human experience to them. So it's sort of matching a broader consumer supplier perspective from a purpose-driven aspect. And I think that that's probably one of the beauties of our industry, as opposed to just being about price. There's that quality human engagement aspect. I know it's not across the board, but hopefully we see more of that. So just to raise those 2 points. Thank you.
But it's still business. So when there's blood on the streets, it's time to buy, or it's time to introduce something that would not be possible when things go well. So I think looking at the upcoming months, there will be a change or even stronger introduction of technological solutions, voice, no voice. I mean, we will see some of the solutions that we have discussed in the past and we're afraid to use them. Safety and security of doing business is important, but it is business. So yes, the human aspect is important, but the financial models that the companies are discussing nowadays will be changing. So we will see probably in the next 18 to 24 months the outcome of the discussions that we are leading today, but it will be positive.
Yes, and I think on that note, I think we do need to do a roundup that is incredibly positive. I think we've all discussed and shared some insights today. And I think I'd be right in saying that the summary is that the industry is on a very positive economic platform. You know, there is going to be ongoing growth. And I think probably the most exciting message is that this industry is going to be working in a collaborative way globally on global trends, global skills, global frameworks, and most importantly on a global approach to driving really key initiatives like impact sourcing, which is actually going to make a difference to the world. So it's an industry driving you know, really positive change, which I think we're all incredibly proud to be part of. So thank you very much. For those questions that not yet answered, I will come back to you in the chat. So expect to hear from me directly. Thank you so much for joining us so early with that presentation, Mark. Really appreciate it. You, Ryan and Debbie, joining super early, and then obviously Anthony and Frankie joining really late, and Traci and Abby, it's just another day in the office for us. It's quite nice and easy at lunch, isn't it? So but anyway, thank you all, and thank you all for joining us, and let's keep the conversation flowing online, if you know what I mean. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.